Hi, everyone. I'm Helen Stock from the MGA, and we're here joined today with the one and only Lee Wybranski. He's joining us for a conversation about golf and golf art and his work at a lot of clubs and courses right here in the Met area. So, Lee, first, how did I do on the pronunciation? And thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing out there in Arizona?
I'm doing very well, thank you. The pronunciation was excellent. We can't complain. It's the usual sunshine outside. It's spring in northern Arizona. How are things with you?
We are good. The sun is trying to peek out here in the Northeast, but I know that looking at some of these images and some of the projects you've worked on, it's giving us all dreams of better days from out on
Yeah.
the golf course for sure.
Well, that's my job.
So I think it would be fair to say that most golf fans, especially anyone who's been to a major, would recognize your work. Some of the iconic and really unique event posters that are always one of the most popular items in the merchandise tents. So now we can meet the artists behind all of those. So I know you have a lot of other projects in your portfolio that you've worked on with a lot of our MJ member clubs, and we will certainly get into those. But first, can you share a little bit of your background with us, how you got into art initially?
Sure. Essentially, I was one of those kids who was buried in comic books and always drawing. I feel like now that I am a parent, I think most kids love to draw for a little while, and then the kids who get the most encouragement tend to stay at it. And I was always, told how good these drawings were, la la la, and so I was just one of those kids that kept on drawing. And once I could read, I was reading comic books, and pretty soon I was drawing Spider-Man and Batman, and that's kind of where it all started, I suppose. And then through the years, through my teens, I was drawing like rock and roll musicians and athletes. And then I went away to art school in upstate New York. I got my BFA out of Syracuse University, and once you become an art student, you become consumed with much more serious topics, but that's pretty much how it came about.
So how did you transition to golf? I think I read about that one of your first projects in the golf world was at Winged Foot.
Yeah, that's true. Right out of college, I kind of stumbled into this business opportunity where I was doing pen and ink architectural drawings of private estates and institutions on the main line outside of Philadelphia, where I'm from. And I did that for a year or two, and we thought at the time, I had a couple of partners, we thought, who could we bring this type of thing to, and that might be interested in more than one of them? Because when you sell to a homeowner or an institution, it's sort of a piece to go over the fireplace. So we thought it would be interesting to approach some of the best golf clubs in the general area and see if they might be interested in this type of a thing. So I specifically remember one of my partners was based in New York, and we did a little bit of research and found the clubs that had the best clubhouses in the metropolitan New York area. And we scheduled a couple of presentations. Winged Foot was among the first presentations that we made, and they were, Colin Burns, the general manager there, was my first client in golf. So I did a drawing of that famous Wendahack clubhouse that they have there, and that obviously opened a few doors. When Winged Foot hires you to do something, a few doors opened pretty quickly at some nearby clubs, and within that first year, we had worked for Ridgewood over in New Jersey, National Golf Links out, obviously in the Hamptons, and trying to think who else, Atlantic, Saucon Valley. So anyways, we got a few. Next thing you know, I was a golf artist, and that's kind of how we got into it. I had been involved only a little tiny bit in my life before that in golf. But then once the work led me to it, I kind of jumped in with both feet and quickly got bitten by the bug, like lots of us do, and became very passionate about the history, playing the game and trying to get better at the game, and learning about the game, learning the history and the culture. As an artist, I feel like, you tend to want to jump into your subject, because that's the more you get into something, the more interesting it becomes, and the more you know your subject as an artist, the better I feel like you could represent it. So I felt like once I started to do a little work in golf, that it was only right that I give it a proper look, and there's been no turning back.
So from there, when you got started from Winged Foot, how has your work kind of expanded throughout the years, and kind of what was your first event-based project?
2001 Senior PGA Championship at Ridgewood Country Club. It was held on Memorial Day weekend, and I believe it was the first senior PGA held outside of Florida in 30 some odd years.
Oh, wow.
So it had started touring again, and it came to Ridgewood. It was a very wet weekend, but I created a great poster for that as one of my favorites. I mean, I always say you try every time, you do your best every time, but just like all the cliches about winning a golf tournament, like how you have to be lucky to win, even if you hit the good shots. I feel like the same is true with these paintings. You give your best every time, but sometimes it just flows and things come together a little bit more easily or what have you. So there's been, a handful over the years that are especially close to my heart. And that's one of them. It's a really great image. Sort of very vintage looking, inspired by, the 30s. And it was well received. There was a limited audience because it was a senior event, and it was a rainy weekend, but people really loved the art, and it was my first time working an event. And I think after that, the next one that I worked was the Walker Cup in 2005 at Chicago Golf Club, which was obviously spectacular. But those were the first couple out of the gate.
Awesome. Well, Ridgewood is another one-to-hack clubhouse, too. So.
Right. I thought that was so interesting. That two of my first three jobs, I think, were Tillinghast golf courses and Wendahack clubhouses. And then I learned that they were the only two such cases. But
there you go.
I became a bit of a Tillinghast specialist in the early years. I did a lot of work on Tillinghast clubs, just coincidentally. But I always felt a kinship for him for that reason. I mean, his courses are very different, one to the next, which I love. Also, he was from Philadelphia, which I also love.
Yeah, we're very blessed with a lot of his courses here.
Sure are.
In our area, sort of everywhere you look, which is great. Well, since you started with those events, and then now you've mentioned you've certainly gotten to the flow of doing those, what's sort of your process with, a poster, the iconic event poster for the US Open? Do you visit the courses beforehand? What's sort of the timeline on things like that?
It typically starts about 9 to 12 months out. I do visit the course for a couple of days, with that sort of an advanced notice. I try and get there in the summer or September at the latest to do my field work. I'll spend a couple of days canvassing the golf course with a sketchbook and a camera, really exploring every nook and cranny typically. More often than not, going in that there's only a few options that people really want to see, but I still like to do my due diligence and really get into the, like I said, the nooks and crannies, and find different looks on the golf course. I feel like that's a big part of my job, is to present the familiar to the golf fan, but in a new way, because everybody knows, for example, the church pews at Oakmont. Golf fans have seen them all before. But when you go to Oakmont, it's hard to ignore the church pews and the clubhouse, for example. So again, my job is to find a different look on something that people already know and love. I find that if you do really interesting looks or really interesting views that aren't very widely known holes, then even if it's a great image, it might not move the needle as much in terms of, you have to give the people what they want a little bit. They want the 7th at Pebble Beach, and the famous par 3, the 10th at Winged Foot. So my process starts with that, trying to find interesting new looks. And then from there, I develop 3 or 4, typically 2 to 3 concepts that I submit to the client with one strong recommendation. I work with the client to select the finalist, And then we generally kick revisions back and forth. This is all digital work at this point in time, so it's easy to make edits. So I make all the collaborative edits on a digital proof. And then once we get final approval on the digital art, then I begin the actual painting, which typically takes anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the level of complexity of the subject. Buildings tend to take a lot longer if you have to paint a lot of little windows, little things like that. But generally it takes about 40 to 60 hours of painting is what the average poster takes me. And then once the final art is complete, it's signed off on by the client. We take them to press, we print the posters, I sign the posters, and then it's time to go and work at the event.
So yeah, speaking of working at the event and those events, and I see, is that a Shinnecock mug you have?
Of course, you know, it's all about the props. This is, we've been, I kind of didn't talk much. I think I left my answer short, the evolution of our work in golf, but we've been doing logo design since the late 90s, but this is our first US Open logo that my firm designed, the 2004 US Open at Shinnecock. So I make sure to have a little sentimental memorabilia around the studio. So yeah, that's a very special event for me as well. I mean, the first time being associated with the national championship in any way was beyond thrilling.
On that note, just looking at the past couple of years, we're really lucky here in the Met area that we've been on a pretty good run where either every year or every other year we seem to have a major event right here in our backyard. And I know you have been involved in a lot of those. So just looking at the past few years, we have Winged Foot this year, Shinnecock was 2 years ago, Baltusrol, Liberty National. What are some of your most memorable events here, kind of right in the metropolitan area?
The 2004 Open at Shinnecock was certainly a highlight for me. It was the first time, as I said, that we were associated with the event. And, you know, being the designer and the drawer of this logo, I literally did ink drawings of this before we translated it into the digital art. So to go from that to seeing it all over everything, you know, thousands of items and merchandise and on the side of tents, it was a really, really huge thrill. I'm trying to run through them in my head. 2009 was not a highlight merely because of the weather. The Bethpage US Open was, you know, very, very soggy. But I created a great image there. It was a neat project since it was right on the heels of the crash in 08, and it was at a state park. So I took my inspiration from the WPA posters from the New Deal and the Depression. And I basically sort of paid homage to those famous 1930s National Park posters at Bethpage. So even though the event wasn't a highlight, I was really happy with the art that I made for that event. And Bethpage is a really, really neat spot. I don't have to tell anybody that, but as an outsider, I feel like, you know, every New Yorker knows how great Bethpage is. But as an outsider, it's a pretty special golf course. Trying to think what else highlights wise. The US Open at Winged Foot in 2006. I didn't do the poster there, but we did do the logo again and sort of had that thrill once more. Bethpage last year, 2019, was pretty great. The one I'm most excited about is the Ryder Cup at Bethpage in a few years. I think that's going to I don't know. The city's going to have to hire more police for that one.
It should be unbelievable for sure. Yeah. Speaking of Bethpage, we are planning our 2020 Met Amateur Championship, which is our biggest amateur event. It's stroke play into match play. For the first time, it'll be at Bethpage Black later this year. So,
fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
Sure all the competitors are excited.
For sure. So speaking of the Met area and our clubs, I know you've done a lot of other work with some clubs on logos, maps and routings, any other projects like that. Could you talk us through some of the highlights from some of those?
The first club that we were involved with branding was a very unique and extremely special in the world of golf, just a really unique opportunity, the Atlantic City Country Club. So it was about 98, 99. I think we were brought in, and then I think the work was launched in 2000 or '01, if I'm not mistaken. It was a 100-year-old club that had been sold to a casino concern. So it was this facility that had a tremendous history. Tillinghast and Walter Travis played the amateur there in 1900. I'm not sure if Tillinghast played in that one, but he played there a lot. They say the term birdie originated at Atlantic City Country Club. Arnold Palmer played there when he was stationed in South Jersey in the Coast Guard back in the 50s. Leo Frazier was the president of the PGA and the owner of the club, he and his family. So it had a tremendous history, but it had a new owner, and the new owner brought us in to help sort of repackage what they had had. Tom Doak was brought in to redo the golf course. It was a William Flynn classic golf course that Doak gave a resurgence of character and scenery to, and challenge, I would say. And we were brought in to rebrand it, create hand-painted yardage books, the scorecards, all the golf course collateral, as well as a large golf course routing, like the one that's behind me here, which hangs in the reception area at Atlantic City. So we kind of had the full enchilada there, and it worked out really, really well. The logo is this little bell. It's a trolley bell with 1897 underneath of it. And it's a trolley bell because way back when, at the end of the day, when the last trolley was leaving for the mainland, they would ring their bell to let the golfers know that they better hustle back in if they didn't want to get stranded at the club for the night.
Wow.
So that's what we ended up working with. And it was kind of neat. It was before the trend of a lot of clubs are putting the dates of establishment under their logos now. It's become very common now that there are many more clubs that are getting to be older as time goes by. But it wasn't such a big thing then. So it was just a great project all around. A recent success story is Cherry Valley in Long Island. We rebranded them maybe it was 2 years ago now. I mean, when you're busy, you're busy and time flies. And at Cherry Valley, it ended up being a sort of a runaway success. You know, the first two months of of the season with the new logo, they had to reorder shirts 3 times. It just sold like crazy off the shelves, which is certainly also, one of the things you like to see, is your client succeeding with the work that you give. Man, I'd need a list in front of me. They're all
well,
that was a very recent one. We did work with Pelham Country Club. We sort of did what we call a little renovation redesign project there, where we didn't make a lot of creative changes. We just sort of streamlined things a little bit. Cleaned up what they had, created standard files, and we're working on a new scorecard for them right now. That's sort of fresh in my mind because I was just on the emailing Mike Diffley this morning. See what else is in that. I mean,
I think Country Club of Darien and their iconic cow logo, right? We're hosting another one of our amateur, our Ike Championship, which is our amateur stroke play event there this summer for the first time. So in our office, that's one of our favorite logos, just that unique, utilizing the cow in that one. That's a great one too.
Well, I think that your event was a little bit of an impulse, an impetus for the work to occur, I believe, because I'm not certain. If I'm recollecting clearly, but I think the people I was speaking with at the club knew that there was going to be sort of an additional spotlight with the Ike this year, and they wanted to make things, perfect. So they had a version of that weather vane logo in action already. They had several, in fact. They had tried a lot of different iterations, trying to, perfect it or refine it, improve it. And then we were put in touch with them, and it was a relatively straightforward affair, meaning they knew they had a weather vane that they wanted, and they made a lot of efforts with it. They knew what wasn't working, so they brought us in, and we just worked a little magic, and it came together very, very nicely. So I'm very happy to have added that club to the portfolio this year, and I know it's going to be a great event. It's a special, special club.
So a good question for you might be, when you work on these projects, especially some of these major events and even some of these local projects, do you get invited to play the golf course?
Like a lot of people who work in golf, you get a lot more invitations than you have the opportunity to accept. So I am often invited, but I'm fortunate to be very busy with a lovely family. So it's hard to carve out an extra day on the end of a business trip to play. So I sneak it in when I can, for sure. I have my opportunities to play some pretty special places pretty regularly. So, you know, there's some invitations. There's a lot of chips. There's a stack of chips on my desk that I need to cash when I get a little bit older, because I've gotten a lot of invitations that I haven't been able to accept yet. That I keep telling them I will one of these days. We've done a number of projects out in Chicago, and one of these days I'm going to make a little tour of the clubs out there. But I have a million friends and clients in your area in terms of golf professionals and greens chairmen and such. So it would be fun to play a handful of your best and brightest.
So I know on your desk behind you, you mentioned there were a few kind of current projects, and then one sort of other iconic winged foot item. So if you want to show us those, we can take a look.
Sure. This is the painting, the completed artwork for the 2020 PGA Championship at Harding Park, which has just been rescheduled for August. So you see here, this is, I have to paint out May and paint in August for this one. But it's a different look, and we're really excited. We sort of showcased some of the famous San Francisco landmarks in a bolder and simpler graphic style. It's the first time kind of working some of things like this into a picture, so curious to see how it goes. I'll probably jump to Wingfoot here since it's most relevant. This is a thrill. You know, I'm a fine artist, but we're also graphic artists here, and working on things like scorecards and placemats for us is almost as much fun as creating a painting. Because there's so much bad stuff out there, and you just want to, you know, I feel like you just want to make something that's simple and quality and clear and attractive. Mm-hmm. And when I come across things like that at clubs, I always appreciate a great scorecard, like a lot of people do. So we try and make great scorecards. We've been making the scorecards for Wingfoot for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years now, quite a while. In fact, I'll have to grab one of those. We have a US Open edition of the Wingfoot scorecard I could share with you.
Oh, great.
But this is the first time we've done the famous Wingfoot placemat. Mm-hmm. And it's also a US Open edition. Obviously, it's logoed for the championship here. And we created some digital art of the golf course and laid out these placemats and just delivered a large quantity of these to the club just a few weeks ago. We were hoping they'd be in use by now, but unfortunately, they probably haven't been unpacked yet, but hopefully soon.
You know, there's so many great treasures and, you know, all of the championship trophies and archives in Wingfoot. And I think in addition to all of those and the great history they have displayed and everything, that the placemats in the grill room are another iconic piece of that clubhouse for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Knowing that, you can imagine it's like an honor to get a job like that. I mean, it's not like a big business, quote unquote, but the placemat at Wingfoot, to people who know, that's as special as it gets.
Right. And who would think such a little thing?
It's so funny, but it is off the little things. I mean, so many people in golf collect great ball markers, certain tees from certain places, scorecards from the best places. So yeah, he said that, Colin told me that he thinks a lot of people don't even use the placemats. The guests just roll them up and take them with them.
Definitely.
So this other piece here is a brand new project that we just unveiled. We rolled this out on social media yesterday, and we call this the Apart and United Project. It's a sort of a PSA in the style of the old World War II posters, and it's intended to showcase and celebrate the medical professionals on the front lines of the pandemic right now, and also an effort to, you know, express solidarity to others in our community and say that even though we're all apart and we're all at home staying away from each other, we're united in this effort, and we're doing it because it's the right thing to do and the safe thing to do, and it's looking out for each other for us to do this. So we rolled this out on social media yesterday. Any proceeds, 80% of profits from sale of this are going into Direct Relief's coronavirus fund. We also sell little stickers, and kind of most importantly, we put a free download with this out with it, so that anyone who liked the image could just download an 8x10 version. My little dream version of this reality is someone in a hospital sees this, likes it, and prints out a couple of dozen on their color printer and just distributes them in the hospital, so that the people who are working and putting themselves at risk and their families at risk will at least have some expression from the outside world of appreciation and acknowledgement. So it's a non-golf related project, one of the few things I get to do outside of the game, but being a little bit frozen in time right now, like a lot of people, we tried to figure out a way that we could make an impact. And so it's been an interesting couple of days with the responses and the feedback we've gotten. So it's been fun.
Good. Yeah, that's great. That's really special and definitely meaningful. And I'm sure people all over the place appreciate that.
Well, it's kind of you to say, and I really like how it came out as an opportunity to do something different, which artistically, that's important. That's part of the reason this picture looks the way it does, as a matter of fact, is, I certainly have developed a style that people consider recognizably mine. And it's largely due to the fact that I use watercolors in a particular way for most of the work that I do. It's wonderful to be acknowledged and recognized for a consistent style and look, but artistically, you need to have change. There needs to be evolution, and there needs to be sort of a little bit of spice added to the mix now and again, I feel like, to keep things interesting. Otherwise, it just becomes a little bit repetitive, and people on the outside get sick of it, and people, the inside your own mind of the artist, you don't remain as challenged and interested, I feel like. So I'm trying, after having done this for a while, I've been doing this 25 years now. I recently realized, I did the math, and I thought, I need to inject a little bit of newness into things in terms of the art. So both of these projects were an opportunity to do something out of the box for me. I thought developing a really funky, bolder style for San Francisco would be appropriate because of the old, kind of the Haight-Ashbury and the arts and crafts thing in California. So, God willing, we'll be there in August, and we'll see how that one goes over.
Yeah, so on that note, thank you again so much for joining us today. And we still have our calendars marked for September, so we will see you at Windfoot.
Look forward to seeing you in person there.
Yeah, it should be spectacular, really, there in September in the fall. One of the best times of year in New York for golf, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. It is the best month to play golf in the Northeast, I think. The golf courses are always in perfect shape, and it's a dry month as far as things usually go. So, yeah, it should be perfect. I can't wait.
We will see you there.
Thanks so much, Helen. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.